Greetings, geeks. Here we are with the ninth annual All Dressed Up with No Place to Go Wizard Halloween costume contest from the year 2000. This is a pretty great selection of costumes. In fact, most of them are very mainstream with Marvel and DC, heavy on the DC. So there's a lot to talk about here. Speaking of which, kicking off the costumes is a Supergirl costume by Sean Evans of Harwood Heights, Illinois. I do have to say, this is really interesting. Sean is the creator of the costume, but the model is Tammy Winters, which is quite a name. I do have to say, this costume, I mean, they're saying it was custom made. It does look like sexy super heroine that you would get at Spirit Halloween or something like that. I do not know that there are any comic book origins for this style of costume. So, a kind of an interesting choice here. Not really a skirt, just got some hot pants and, kind of a crop top look there. So, anyway, a very interesting kickoff. Of course, Wizards going to be excited about this style of costume. However, what I find fascinating is I always say, work with what you got. And I don't know that this is any type of photo manipulation. This Plastic Man by Chris Guerrero of New York, New York, that just looks like he said, you know what? I have a long neck. I can stretch out my neck. I bet I could do a pretty dang good Plastic Man impersonation. And he does. Again, it's interesting that it ultimately is a pretty simple costume. He's also got some hot pants, but then you also just take a sweater and you put those crisscross straps in front, get yourself some Elvis shades, essentially. This is very reminiscent of, in my area at least, the syndicated version of the Plastic Man cartoon had a live action host. So it was just great to see this representation of the character once again as a real person. Now, Slave Girl Leia, I think, is interesting. I do believe that there had been Slave Girl Leia costumes in the past. In fact, it's either this one or slightly in the future where they have multiple Leias. Like it was just a very popular costume that year, or maybe it was just a group photo from one of the conventions I'm remembering. But anyway, of course, Rachel from Friends had also made this even more popular, bringing Ross's fantasy to life. So now below we have a Captain America, which what's really interesting about this is Jordan Monsell. But what I think is fascinating is he was able to pose in front of what looks like a World War II bomber. That's what appears to be in the background there. But also, like, there are muscles that seem to be built into the costume, which again feels like a modern day costume you could just buy at a Halloween store. What you would not get there, though, are the boots, the pirate boots with the big folded flap at the bottom. So that is very comics accurate. You got to love that. Now, going on to the other page here, they have a preacher recreation. So this guy obviously had some very cool Photoshop skills to make himself look like Cassidy from Preacher, that Irish vampire. But it is a really cool look. Again, a simple costume ultimately. So to put in the extra effort to say, like, yeah, I'm just a guy in a jean jacket with red stuff all over my neck. But hey, look at me. You might recall this character that I have a fondness for. Now, I do love the next two Batgirl costumes. So obviously we have the Cassandra Cain Batgirl, which feels like something you're just not going to see very often. Just one of those characters very big in this moment, and especially that new cowl that was like fully covering her face, no mouth, revealed or anything like that. Now this is by Carl Rumpler, but again, it looks like he got his sister or most likely wife, Jennifer Rumpler, to pose with this costume. So it is very impressive. Now, I think a lot of people have an affinity for the more comic book accurate Batgirl that we have Jane Kernan here, which is pretty awesome. This is, again, most people would probably think, oh, they're going to do the Yvonne Craig from Batman style. No, I mean, this is Barbara Gordon direct from the comics, classic cowl with the black costume and yellow gloves. We're not talking about a shiny purple bodysuit. So very, very cool. I like that she even seems to have some sort of bat purse down below. And maybe you major old school Batgirl fans could tell us, is that where she kept her gadgets? I don't know. She also has a utility belt. Now, right in between, awesome Batman Beyond costume, like amazing Batman Beyond costume. It makes you wonder if he actually included some sort of a wing attachment that could be put on. But either way, I mean, that is just truly impressive. Again, for the time, a relatively new character and design, very impressive cowl. Now down below, speaking of a mask that's pretty impressive, we have Aaron Abercrombie as Rorschach. This is kind of strange that you don't consider when you see it as drawn by Dave Gibbons, but the fact that his mask is white and he even includes multiple different shapes of the mask, which is really cool. But then he has that white scarf. I don't think it's an ascot. I think it's just a scarf. And it blends into the whiteness of the mask and makes it look like almost like a furry beard or something coming off Rorschach. Again, as portrayed in the comics, you never quite get that impression. But when you see it in real life, you're like, huh, interesting. All right, let's move on to our next page here. All right, what I find interesting about this is generally they would have babies in superhero costumes over the years of this contest, but this one is very heavy. As you can see here, Mary Yang of Laguna Niguel, California, which is actually very close to where I grew up, created multiple JLA costumes for her son, I'm going to assume here. Now, Superman, excellent costume, very fun with the kid trying to bend a steel bar. You think they would have pre-bent it for him to give him more of an effect, but I guess not. Now, you have the 90s era Aquaman costume. They don't show a harpoon hand there, so maybe they didn't recreate it or they just forgot to have him raise it up there, but that would have been awesome. I do like the gag of his Flash costume being next to a car. So I guess it's supposed to be like he caught up to the car, but it would have been fun if he was more in motion running along. But truly, the most impressive is the Martian Manhunter costume. Look at the brow, look at the top of the head on this, but like the boots, the cape, the strap across, like everything is so accurate there. I'm actually curious to know if that is a full head mask or if that is maybe like just a brow piece with green makeup, but I'm going to assume that we're looking at a full mask that they actually had to sculpt, which is pretty cool. Now, of course, you'd be expecting a Lara Croft. She was the best selling comic of 1999, they told us. So we have a Lara Croft, Jennifer DeGrego. So she's of South Carolina there. It's really an interesting pose that she's chosen. I mean, I get it. It just, I don't know. Maybe she was copying a comic book cover or a pose from the game, but it looked like she could have been in more of an action pose. I also don't see a pistol. I guess the pistol strapped to her leg, but you would have thought maybe that'd be sticking out, pointing at the camera. Now, getting back to the kids, though, it does make it look like Lara Croft, by the way, is babysitting all these superhero kids. It is kind of strange to put her on the same page there. But I love this little Thor. That little Thor has got the look, man. I mean, this is classic Kirby Thor, but then just the pose and that Mjolnir looks amazing. That hammer is truly impressive, but like just every detail that I'm seeing here is blowing me away. I'm just like, wow, that is a cool costume. I wonder if this kid ever saw Adventures in Babysitting. I knew about another kid who liked Thor a whole lot. Now, also very cool to have a team of Green Lanterns, a mini Green Lantern Corps, if you will, where you get a Hal Jordan and you get a Kyle Rayner. Again, makes you wonder, were these kids fans of Green Lantern or was dad a fan of Green Lantern? Can we dress you up, kids? The cute factor might win a surprise. But no, either way, it's just kind of cool. These kids got a chance to do that. Again, the classic Kyle Rayner costume, not brought to life very often. So that's cool. Now, this Beaker costume is interesting. And I don't know if they just needed to fill space, but I am almost certain that this was originally a reject that they put in their Wizard News section. They always had a sidebar in each issue where they would take either a convention photo or a rejected Halloween costume contest photo, and they would put it on the sidebar with a funny caption. In this case, once again, they have another one where he's reading an issue of Wizard, but maybe there were two people that did Beakers a couple years apart. What do I know? What I know is that Magdalena, another new Top Cow character, this is showing some dedication by Nelisa, which is am I reading that right? Nelisa Armayol of Davenport, Florida. I mean, that is pretty cool. Again, when you think about it, like you're showing up to a costume party, they're like, "Are you evil Red Riding Hood? Like, what are we looking at here?" She's like, "No, I'm the Magdalena, you idiot." I'm sorry, I don't read these comics. So some comics that they surely would have read, though, were X-Men. This is really neat here with Nightcrawler and Mystique. This is before they were revealed to be mother and son, right? Somebody was seeing the connection ahead of time, I guess. I mean, if not, there are some confusing, damage control related commentaries going on here about Nightcrawler's tail and that positioning. But what I love is not only like, the tail on Nightcrawler, the face makeup and all of that, but Mystique, she shows more skin than Nightcrawler does, right? And so what have they done? They've got like this blue velvet and spandex bodysuit that the model is wearing here. So it's Kelly Holefield as Mystique and Garrett Holt as Nightcrawler. But man, this is really cool. Also, it's another entry from South Carolina. So who knew that we had so many fans in South Carolina digging their comic books? Now, the last one here, this Iron Man costume, because it's small on the page, it's hard to tell if this is an adult. I'm going to assume it's an adult or a teenager and not a little kid, but it looks like it could go either way. But the Silver Centurion Iron Man armor, that is a choice, and that is an awesome choice. Again, it makes you wonder though, how did they sculpt out of what looks to be some sort of like plastic or fiberglass or something? How did they make that costume? Because most of these are fabric, right? It seems pretty straightforward, but that one took some actual cutting and crafting. So that is cool. All right, well, let's get to our final costumes and determine the winner. Yeah, the big reveal is on its way. All right. Well, we have a lot of Spider-Man related costumes on here. Now, at first look, you might think, oh, it's the same person for all of them, but no, this is multiple different entrants here. So the first one we have is Craven the Hunter, not looking quite like Aaron Taylor Johnson. This is a little more filled out Craven, but still awesome for the time. You gotta love it. Looks like actually he could be some sort of male stripper. Hey, Craven is on the hunt, ladies. Let's make some noise. But I am really impressed by this Hobgoblin costume, actually. That is a pretty cool look. That works. Now, the face is maybe not as grotesque as you would imagine. It seems a little more smooth, but still pretty cool. Now, a double shot here from Robert James Tannehill as the Beetle and the Shocker. Now, the Beetle is looking a little goofy, although it is very comics accurate. But the Shocker, how do you get those weird waffle marks all over like, is it drawn on? Was it stitched on? I think that is a very cool look, but you got to have someone to bring them to justice, right? So you have Bars Barrera of the Philippines with a great Spider-Man cover. Also, I love that they tilted it sideways. I assume the photo was, put in, to Wizard that way. But that is just, it's a perfect insertion of the Spider-Man into this whole design. So I'm going to assume that was Steve Blackwell. Steve, great job there. But finally here, the grand prize winner was John Dunavant of Oak Park, Michigan with Gunwitch. Huh? Gunwich. So this is, I don't want to say it's obscure, but it certainly is one of those costumes that you're going to say, okay, I need to research this because this is from Dan Brereton's creator-owned Nocturnals comic, which I don't know that like it was a huge hit. Dan Brereton was certainly a popular artist, but it's one of those things where you're going to be like, it looks cool. I'm very impressed, but I have no frame of reference. But Wizard, of course, is going to say, if you're going to go all in on this obscure character and you do it this well, you're our grand prize winner. So you have to just give him a big thumbs up for the work that John was doing here. Now, I will say actually that if you are interested or if you had forgotten all about Nocturnals, Dan Brereton is actually doing something on Kickstarter, I believe, and has been doing some releases related to Nocturnals. I heard about it on the Dollar Bin Bandits podcast, our friends. So you can go check that out. But hey, thank you for checking out this edition of the Halloween costume contest. Next time around, we'll be covering the 10 years of Cosplay and Wizard magazine. But hey, maybe this gave you some ideas for your own Halloween. And until next time, keep your books bagged and boarded.